We'll go ahead and get started promptly. And so I'm going to cover a lot of the planning information and options that are available with our system. And then we'll talk about installation and we'll end with a little bit of troubleshooting. And we'll get that all into about an hour. All right, we're going to start here. I got about 100 slides to go through in an hour. So this is a more formal title. We're going to talk about hydronics overview. And we come from a background of doing R&D work on high performance buildings. Here in Minnesota, we have a research campus. We've done several buildings that are super insulated, oriented to capture sun for passive solar gain. And every one of them has in-floor heat. And so our question as we were doing each of those is there a better way to do in-floor heating? And lo and behold, we came up with a way. What we'll cover today, an overview of what in-floor heating is, some of your options and how to plan it, and selecting boilers as part of that. Then we'll get into the HUG system, step-by-step, startup procedures, how to configure it, and install the thermostats. Then we're going to talk about troubleshooting. In-floor heating is great because it's comfortable. That's the number one thing people want. It's a little more efficient because you don't have high temperatures up against a good portion of your ceiling surface and wall surface. There's less dust blowing around. You can change fuel systems if you want. Traditionally, an in-floor heat system is done with loops in the floor or pipes in the floor that water flows through. Hi, Norman. Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
I'm into talking about the basics of in-floor heating first, and then and some of the options with our system, and then we'll talk about the installation and troubleshooting of it.
Sounds good.
So the traditional system, you got loops in the floor, you run hot water through it, it warms your floor. Pretty simple. Those connect to manifolds. You got to feed all the loops. There's pumps to do that. The heat comes from a boiler. There's a expansion tank because as you heat the water up, it expands and you have to allow for that. Otherwise, it'll generate very high pressures. You also have to be able to take bubbles out. So you have to have a bubble remover. And if the system gets low, you got a fill valve. And there's a lot of little details here to make that work. This is a actual implementation. A few years ago, a guy put this in. He later found our system and became our salesman. Now his system looks like this on the right. Significantly easier. We got rid of 90% of the parts, and we'll show you a little bit more about how that happens in a moment. First, we're going to keep talking about the generals of floor heating. Homes, garages, and shops. We sell a lot to farmers and anyone doing general shop building. Then you can do, of course, small retail. We got a place in town building a new flower shop and garden center. They're doing our system. And you can use de-icing, use it for driveways and walkways. Where just later on today, we'll be putting in a demonstration system of the sidewalk and driveway system that one of our partner companies sells. Hello, John Thielen. Welcome. I don't know if you can hear me. We're into talking about the generals of in-floor heat, and then we'll talk about the options for our system, and then we'll talk about installing it and troubleshooting. So first, we're going to talk about under the floor planning, how to plan the layout of the loops, what kind of PEX tubing, and how to handle concrete floors and wooden floors. So the first thing you want to do is figure out which parts of your building you want to be able to have separate control over. Plan your heating zones. Then in each zone, You want to, each zone will have to have its own thermostat to control the temperature. And then in each zone, you lay the loops out so that they are separate in that zone. They don't cross the different zones. That gives you good control over what's happening in each one. When you're planning the loops, up to 300 feet of tubing, that's half-inch PEX tubing, which is what we recommend. You run the tubing through every foot of the floor, and in some places, particularly outside, like doing snow melt applications, and they got to be 6-inch spacing. Some people will do 6-inch spacing under wood floors also, particularly with some of the systems I'll show you. To do those loop layouts, you can use LoopCAD software, which is a pretty easy to use system. We offer that as a service for our customers. In the past, we've just taken a floor plan and drawn on it with markers and said that looks like about the right length. Not quite as sophisticated. It worked for us back then. And it's definitely doable, especially for the simpler buildings. So here's an example we'll walk through real quick. Here's the layout of the building. The floor plan's on the right. We take that. We can lay the tubing over it. On the left is what it'll look like. Output from the system. And each loop is color-coded and labeled, and they tell you how long it's going to be and everything. It's important when you're laying them out to make sure that you keep track of which end goes with which loop. We just spent quite a while troubleshooting that for one customer. Couldn't figure out why half his living room was cold, but the back hallway was always warm. So keep track of which end goes to which part or which loop in the floor. So yeah, this is what it looks like here. I've incorporated some outdoor spaces, some patios. You see that they're denser. The tubing is laid in 6-inch on center there and 12-inch on center in the rest of it because it's a slab on grade, one level with concrete. And this is what it would look like with the tubes in the floor. Now, what type of PEX? We usually work with PEX B, 1/2-inch diameter. That's what we recommend. There's other types of PEX. Oxygen barrier type is important for code. For a lot of traditional hardware, it's important, and so that's why they made it for the code. They don't want oxygen in some of the boilers and other metal parts that may be susceptible to it. Our system doesn't have that sensitivity, but we usually recommend people put it in just so that there's no disagreements anywhere. We use 1/2-inch diameter. Those typically come in 300-foot and 1,000-foot rolls. Should change that to rolls. So when you're planning that, you plan 4 250-foot loops to use that material effectively, or 3 333-foot loops. I know the guideline was 300-foot that I mentioned, but it really doesn't. It's not critical. If you get just over 300, it's not going to stop working. So the concrete floor considerations. The most popular thing to heat with in-floor heat, because honestly, the cold concrete feels colder than a wooden floor. It sucks the heat out of your feet more. You always need insulation underneath it. Typically, the way it's done today is tubes stapled to the insulation. The staples, little plastic staples, there's a machine. You see this guy up in the right corner walking behind one guy unrolling, the other guy walking with a special stapling device. That tool it's another couple $100. For huge rolls, I'd recommend a unroller. If you're working with 1,000-foot rolls, use an unspooler, and that would make it a lot easier. Where the ends come up, and this is where you want to make sure you keep track of which end is which loop comes up where. The loop plans, there will actually be a feed and a return side specified so that the warmer stuff coming straight out of the system goes to the right part of the floor where you need just a little more heat, like against the outer wall, for example. Another option, and we saw this at a trade show and we're like, oh my gosh, our customers are going to love that. And they have. We've been selling this across the country, and into Canada. We don't make it, but we resell it. What it is it makes it a lot easier to get the spacing even, lay the floor so that the it lays out easier, it protects the tubing, and it helps you get it more consistent. And the clean grid makes it so that you can follow the plan better. Hello, Scott. Welcome. We're into our presentation a bit, talking about various options and planning considerations. Then we'll talk about actually installing and troubleshooting after that.
Sounds good.
So heat sheet insulation, very popular. It doesn't cost much more than a normal pink foam would, and it's a lot easier to get the tubing in. Now, where the tubes come up, we offer the Holy Hose Holder. First time we saw it, I'm like, man, there's a lot of holes in that thing. That's how it got its name. That has labels for numbers and feed and return. See, it's really easy to keep things labeled, and the spacing is just right to fit behind our machine. There's other options available. This only handles 10 loops. If you need more than that, you can get these extra loop kits. If you only need a few, just get these loop kits, or you can get them yourself at a hardware store. The Easy Route is another product that we resell. And with that, you can get up to 16 loops in the width behind our tank unit, which is the maximum number of loops our system can do. Okay, and we've covered concrete. Now we'll talk about various options for wooden floors. You can go on top of the floor with a couple different systems. You can go under the floor with a system. So the gypcrete over the floor is a very popular option. It's what we see as the best performance for the price. You staple the tube down to the floor, and then you got to plan 1.5 inches thickness to be able to fill that concrete, or 1.5 inch layer of gypcrete. So you got a different bottom plate, an additional bottom plate under the wall, and that allows for that thickness. And then you've still got a bottom plate to attach your drywall to and such. This has the advantage of making the floor feel more solid. It's more sound insulating between upstairs and downstairs, and it's a moderate price. Sometimes it's tricky to find a good contractor, though. So the Eco-Warm panel and these above floor panels, they are really nice to work with. They've got a coating of aluminum on the top and pre-made grooves that you put the tubing into. They are a bit more expensive. So there's Eco-Warm is one brand, Warm Board, Thermal Board, Warm Zone. There's all sorts of products like this out there on the market, made with plywood and an aluminum coating. You give them your floor plan, they'll figure out exactly which pieces you need and cut to what shape, and they'll send you the pieces and the plan. The on-panel option is another variation of that, made in plastic. Mr. Peck's retro panels are another example. They have a lot of flexibility for how you can route those things in there. And it has a plastic cover that gives it a nice smooth look, but there are seams between them. So generally, that's not, you put a floor finishing layer above that. Now, this is one of those systems that requires 6-inch on center spacing because the heat doesn't spread sideways through the plastic very well. So you put the tubes more close together and you get a more even surface temperature that way, more even heating. All right. Last option for above the floor is a do-it-yourself, where you cut strips of plywood, you use aluminum heat spreaders, which are these aluminum bracket things here that go over the pecs and help spread the heat side to side. It's higher labor, lower materials cost, and it's more effective than heating under the subfloor. But that is under the subfloor is another option that we'll talk about in just a moment. Ranked in our favorite options, the Gypcrete, like as I explained, moderate price, moderate to install, high performance. The EcoWarm panels and above floor board type systems are more expensive, pretty easy to install. And the aluminum heat spreaders are much more work, but they're less expensive per square foot. So underfloor with the heat spreaders is another option. It's very popular because it's out of the way and doesn't affect your subfloor, your floor heights, or anything like that. My cousin and I, this is my cousin, we retrofitted his 100-year-old house in St. Paul, and it system sure works. But oh my gosh, we started out excited, and our shoulders fell off. Only little ways into the job. It was a lot of work, working overhead like that. Plus, in an old house, turns out there's lots of little things attached to the ceiling and nails coming down through it. We had to pound down or grind off. So now we've got loops in concrete. We got loops in your wood floors if you have any. Let's talk about pressure testing. Before you close it up, either put your final floor on or pour that concrete, make sure that those PEX tubes are intact and don't have a leak. Now's the time to fix them. So we sell these kits. Since we don't have a typical pressure testing kit for PEX, they'll have a manifold that they all connect to at one point. Since our system doesn't require the manifold, we sell this kit to be able to daisy chain them together. You can put as many loops as you want all together like that. And then we've got the end. You add air, minimum 30 PSI. Some codes will require much higher and for longer time. And a lot of people will leave that pressure gauge on there as they are pouring the concrete, just to make sure that nothing gets damaged. Okay, hydronic fluid. Your basic choices are antifreeze or water. And the only reason to pick antifreeze is if you're pretty sure it's going to freeze. Excuse me, I got something in my throat today. The antifreeze is more expensive and it transfers heat a little worse than water. So what you're gonna, the only real reason to go with it is if you are concerned about freezing. People with cabins that they're going to be leave for a long time. They're often not there and may not be able to tend to it if it loses power or loses heat for some reason. They want antifreeze for peace of mind. Anyone, of course, doing snow melt applications has to have heavy antifreeze. A lot of people with shops and garages with big doors that could accidentally get left open, they like those. The main thing is you want antifreeze that's rated for this job, for hydronic use. Cryotech 100 is what we sell, works very well. We recommend generally a 1-to-1 mix of the Cryotech 100. So 1 bucket of this, 1 bucket of water, and that's gives the best protection and best performance, or best for the price. If you're going to do straight outside in the snow melt application, at least up around our neighborhood, you're going to need pretty much straight from the bucket. It's just a little bit of water added. And no RV antifreeze. That stuff is too biodegradable. Even this stuff, the good stuff, you need to use it at a high enough concentration that it doesn't break down. You need at least 20 to 25% antifreeze in your system. So pros and cons, I think I covered all this already. Water's better, heat transfer, less cost. Antifreeze just won't freeze, but it's higher on pretty much everything else. Okay, we're on to a little bit about our system, give you an overview of what it is and why we did it this way. And that helps you be in the right mindset as you install it to understand what's going on, not just kind of go through the steps. So basically, we figured out a system that does everything on this left side over here, but does it without any valves or fittings. And the way this is done is we have a box of water. We've got a handful of pumps sitting in that water. One pump in the corner sends the water up through a heat source, a boiler or water heater, and that returns the hot water into the tank. And then each of these little pumps sends that water and connect or out to the loops in the floor. Each pump connects to one or two loops only. So I'll show you how that works out in the real life in a moment. But that whole system is controlled at low voltage. It runs on 12 volts, and there's a thermostat. That the board's function is to take 4 thermostats and tell each pump when to run based on a setting for it. But overall, it's extremely simple, no valves, no manifolds, low pressure, low voltage, and it's flexible heat sources. Inside, the flow is just a little more subtle. The return water comes into this baffle in the back. There's a particular section. All the cooler return water comes in there. Then the pump in the corner draws that coldest water and sends it up to the water heaters, and then returns it. It mixes with the return flow and warms up all the temperature, all the water to a higher temperature, and then these pumps send it back out to the floor. The installation is pretty simple. It consists of connecting the plumbing with we have a very unique silicone hose system where our silicone hose, you just push it over the ends of the PEX coming up out of the floor. The light blue pipes coming up vertically here are from the floor, and then the silicone hose pushes over that, and you squeeze it with a clamp, and that's the extent of the plumbing. Same with the water heater there. There are cases like this one, the water's coming out and it goes through a splitter. We call that, when we specify it, we call it a 2-loop pump, a pump feeding 2 loops. And in that case, each loop gets 90% of the flow that one loop does. It's not a split 50-50 because there's lower resistance. The pump can move more water. And so each loop sees 90%. When I saw that, I was like, man, that's the best bargain ever. Suitability, put it on the main floor, same floor you're heating, that's great. You can go up and down. You can go up and down too. You can even go up 2 loops. For a while, this is here because that wasn't a recommended option. Now we've tested it, improved it out. The pumps push plenty hard to be able to go fill those loops up high. I wouldn't go up 3 stories. I had to disappoint one guy who wanted to do a 4-story building with it, but had to have it in the basement. And the only thing we don't recommend is radiators. There have been a few special conditions for customers that wanted to do that that I've worked with, but in general, radiators are a bad idea with it. Think floors only. Okay, this is how you think about the system. You start with this, the standard system, which just has the pump to feed the heat source. It's got the tank of water, the controls are there and ready to go. Then you add the pumps you need for your system. Do you need an additional heat source pump? Because we can do up to 3 heat sources in one tank. Do you need 1-loop pumps, 2-loop pumps? And then we have a splitter kit later on that you can, in case you want to take your 1-loop pump and actually feed another loop with it for some reason. So 1-loop pumps, 2-loop pumps, and heat source pumps. And then you choose your heat sources. You can choose a gas boiler, electric boiler, combi boiler. If you've got your own system with a wood boiler, we can work with that. We'll talk about the heater selection. How do you choose which heater you need? It basically comes down to fuel type and size. We'll talk about size here, which is they're rated in BTUs, and the electric ones are rated in kilowatts, which kilowatts converts to BTUs. And we can help you size that out. But the size of boiler you need, the number of BTUs, that's dependent on how your house or building is built. How much does it take to heat that building? That's a function of the shell, the amount of insulation in the walls, the roof, how airtight it is, and how many windows there are. Windows are about R3 compared to a typical wall, which is R 25 to 30, or upwards of 30 in more high performance buildings. So we can help you figure out. Generally, we'll do a rough estimate first. If you're generally normal, typical new construction, 20 to 25 BTUs per square foot is what we're going to calculate as the first estimate. You can use more sophisticated calculations like manual J is a process that heating and cooling contractors will typically use. And we can walk you through something like that also if needed, or recommend someone to help with that. Once you know the size, then it's the fuel, electric, gas. We have both options. And the fuel cost is definitely the most important thing. Electricity is usually the highest cost. Dual fuel electricity cuts that a lot. Propane and electricity are in the same ballpark. This is only a snapshot in time. Things change. Propane changes cost over the course of a year and from year to year. It varies with where you're at. And in some cases, electricity is pretty constant. Once it just slowly goes up over time, but it's not volatile the same way that natural gas and propane are. Natural gas has had a few spikes, but it's way significantly cheaper than electricity and propane. If you can do a heat pump on dual fuel, that's definitely a win. That's the best that you can get. So this slide just shows that, okay, yeah, the cost changes over time, and with the this is propane over time, natural gas over time, and this is how electricity varies by location. So if you want help doing a dual fuel calculation or figure out what's best for you, we can take a look, ask you a few questions, and get you there. And then we'll help you figure out if you want gas or electric. Those are the two most popular choices. This is a slide showing our most popular boilers. They're actually on-demand tankless water heaters. And the reason they work great for us is we don't have to send them an additional control signal. We just turn the water on and it heats it. It's a flow controlled system. These don't require a minimum pressure either, since our system is low pressure. We like low pressure capable boilers and water heaters. So we've got the gas ones. They come in two different sizes. Generally, the 120 is the most popular one that we sell, 120,000 BTU per hour unit. They rate these in BTUs. They rate electric in kW, which we can convert. The 12 and the 18 are 40,000 and 60,000 BTUs respectively, which is a very typical size.
What's the lowest temperature rating for those units? Do you know?
They can run, I wouldn't run them any lower than 80. You got to have something above room temperature. But yeah, they'll run real low like that, 80, 90. But generally, you'll probably want to run them a little hotter so that it warms the tank up, because there's
the minimum setting on the high pressure systems is like 120 to 125 typically.
Yeah, then they step it down. So a low pressure boiler here. This is our streamlined plumbing. Boilers that require pressure require a heat exchanger in the system. They have a heat exchanger loop, and then we take our heat off the other side of the heat exchanger. To facilitate that, we have a design with we call it our Pro Line unit because it's usually professionals working with this. And we put a heat exchanger right in the tank, which makes for a nice clean look still, and simple install. Then we have the kit of parts to work with those boilers, particularly with Navien and Renai. These are what they will need to adapt. And then wood boilers are another popular option. On those ones, you want to take the heat exchanger out of the tank and keep it on the wall because there's always hot water flowing through there, and we don't want to overheat the tank. And it's real easy to add an electric backup. There's other boilers we sell from Lochinvar and Electro Industries. They're the most common. The gas or electric pros are the gas is more little cheaper especially for natural gas, a little cheaper for propane, but electric, it's really easy to install. The boiler itself is cheaper. The hardware for the gas is more expensive, but you can go dual fuel and take advantage of them that way. To do that, we have this handy dandy add-on board that'll control 2 different boilers and take the input and switch from one source to the other. It takes the input signal from your power company. We can do up to 3 heat sources. No one's ever done that. 2 is as many as anyone practically needs. I keep hoping someday someone will have that kind of fun. Here's a walkthrough that I would do with a contractor, someone who's going to be installing it multiple times, just to understand the process we go through to determine the square feet and then how many pumps it takes to serve those loops, and then the size of the boiler required. Here we're using 22 BTUs per square foot, 46,000 BTUs, and we would recommend our 14. We used to have a 14 kW heater, but we'd probably recommend 18 kW. Now that's the more popular boiler. There's a planner on the website, a lot of training and instructional videos. There's the planner on the website is broken at the moment. We're in the midst of looking at a transition to a different website, and it's right in the middle of functionality. How it fits code, if your code inspector has any questions, we have a report for them explaining how it fits more fundamental code. Some people have questions about the hoses and pumps. They are both well overrated for the job that they are doing. The pumps will last 30,000 hours in boiling water and glycol. And the hoses are meant to operate in engines, vibrating around heat and chemicals for 20 plus years. So your utility room is not going to stress it out. The pump curves, our pumps will push as hard as any other circulation pump out on the market, but they have lower flow because they are typically only feeding 1 or 2 loops, which is all that's needed. So they do the job they're meant to do, and they do it for a long time. Okay, now we'll get into the installation part. The basics, there's 5 basic steps. Notice there's 7 on the list here. The first one is preparation. It's not one of the basic steps, but it has to get done. And then the final test at the end. So in a nutshell, we're hooking up the plumbing, hook up the floor loops, then you hook up the boiler. Then you wire the thermostats, then you fill the tank with water, and you power it up and you run the purge function to purge each line of air and fill it up with water. And then you go into the system settings and make sure that the thermostats are set up with the right pumps. So make sure your boiler's on the wall. Make sure you have an outlet. If you're running a smart thermostat, we'll send a 24-volt power supply with you. That also needs a plug. A gas water heater will need a plug, so you might need 3 nearby. And you make sure you get your loops in the floor. You know which end is which and which loop goes where. antifreeze if you need it, and then make sure you got the tools that you need to install it: pliers, a tubing cutter, a wire cutter, and a tiny screwdriver. Step one, take it out of the package, remove all the packing material, and make sure all the little pumps are seated with their intake nozzle sitting right in the little groove for them. Everything's flexible, the cord they're on, the hose, it's easy to adjust it and set it in place. And then you move the whole box and you bring it into place near the tubing so that you can hook those up. There's an optional overflow drain, takes a 1/2-inch hose on there. If you have a floor drain, it's not bad to run it there. A lot of people don't bother. There's not a lot that can happen to overfill it. And now we'll connect the hoses. And I have a little video for that, which says it better than I can.
Next, we'll connect the source and return hoses to the PEX pipes. Note that the hoses come out in 2 rows and are marked with arrows, indicating flow into and out of the tank. First, trim the hoses and PEX pipes as needed to make connecting neat and easy. You may want to leave some slack to allow for ease of moving the tank.
So pretty easy.
Is there a drain at the bottom of the tank for like 10 years when I want to get, and maybe the efficiency's gone, maybe out of the glycol, like an automobile, you run it for 250,000 miles and you got to replace your radiator fluid?
There's no drain on the bottom. What I'd recommend you do is you disconnect one of the hoses from a pump
and just run it.
Yeah.
Easy enough.
And then
is the unit wall mountable? Can I mount it on the wall?
It's not really made for that, but you can build a shelf under it.
Yeah, okay.
Plan for 200-pound weight.
200, okay, got it.
When it's full of water. To unclamp it, you can grab one side of the clamp and you slide it sideways, and the little teeth just slide apart and it pops loose. Okay.
All you need to do is firmly push and twist the silicone hose onto the PEX tube as far as you're able, usually about 1 inch. Next, you'll need to find your plastic clamp. These will come with your unit. Then, attach it where the junction occurs, and then tighten with your hands. Then, tighten with a pair of pliers.
We need to design you
This
a
is what
insert
a
in the
should
PEX.
look like. Repeat as necessary for
In the
all
PEX brand.
PEX tubes coming out of the ground.
An insert for what?
So there's that big PEX wrench that everybody uses to install PEX. It goes all the way back to 1970s when, you were told, don't put a heating system for PEX in your house. It's awful. It's water. You don't do that. I lived through that whole thing because my father-in-law built a house with PEX back in the 70s, and they were telling him, don't do it. Whole world changed, didn't it?
Yeah.
That automotive pipe right there is better than, anyway, there's all the clamp systems that they make. You guys should just go get 5,000 of them made with the right diameter to connect. The PEX connectors is what I'm saying. They'll have a specific diameter because people are used to that. So anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm sold already.
It'd be possible.
Huh? It's so possible because those inserts go in, they get replaced in the wrenches for the size of the PEX. So now you just have one and you have your name on it.
Could
anyway.
be.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting again.
No problem. Okay. Next, we're going to hook the water heater up. And again, the video says it as least as well as I can.
Now, we're going to connect the long blue hoses on each end of the tank to your water heater. The blue hose on the right side connects cold water into the water heater. one on the left side connects warm water from the heater to the tank. Note that the blue hose is hooked to the top of the electrical heaters and at the bottom of gas heaters. We recommend using clamps to secure the hoses onto the nozzles.
All right, we got the floor loops hooked up. We got the heater hooked up. Now we're going to connect the thermostats. And this is what the thermostat connector looks like. You got the 4 W pins. That's the active contact that the thermostat makes. It's a double W terminal out of it. R is the power, or red wire usually. W is usually the white wire, and C is the common. That's usually a black or blue wire. So we can handle 4 thermostats. This is how you strip a thermostat wire: outer layer first, and then the inner layers. You see this is a red and white 1-pair thermostat wire. A lot of thermostat wires have a lot more leads than that. For a simple thermostat, that's all you need, a mechanical thermostat. For a smart thermostat, it'll require 24 volts. So the white wire goes in the white, red wire goes in the red. If your wires aren't those colors, then it's W and R. For a smart thermostat, you got to pull that jumper, and I'll show you what the video says about that.
Step 2. Connecting your thermostat. First, we'll route the thermostat wires. Just below the middle of the green control board is a hole to pull the thermostat wires through. We recommend giving yourself enough slack in these wires to not only reach the front of HUG Hydronics tank, but also to move the tank by 12 to 18 inches. Next, gently pull out the 12-pin wire connector from the bottom center of the control board. Now, for each thermostat, we're going to connect the wires. Strip the end of the thermostat wires. If you have one, stick the white wire in the connector for the appropriate thermostat zone number. Then, tighten the little screw and turn to the right, as tight as it will easily go. This should hold the wire securely and make the electrical connection possible. The red wire will go in one of the power terminals. Tighten as with the white wire. Do not plug the connector back into the control board yet. If you're installing a smart thermostat, there's one more step you need to do. First, you'll need to remove jumper JP43, the one above the power section on the control board. Then, strip 3 wires from the thermostat wires. These are the red, white, and blue or black wire. Connect the white wire to the thermostat zone you wish to connect it to. The red wire goes into the power terminal R. Then, the black or blue line goes into a common terminal. Do not plug the 24 VAC power supply into the outlet until it is time to power up.
Okay, here's a diagram of what that smart thermostat looks like. They take the 3 wires, but they require 24 volts, so we have an outside 24 volt power supply. That connects to the R and C terminals. And you pull that jumper because our board runs on 12 volts, and pulling that makes sure that the 24 volt doesn't backfeed into the board. Backfeeding won't break the board, but it won't work quite right either. Another diagram showing the same thing here. This one shows the additional on the 24 volt power supply. There's the 2 terminals. There's actually 3 terminals, I think, and you want to use the 2 outside ones, and you want to provide your own wire for that then. The alarm board option is, the alarm board is not optional anymore. It's on every unit. We just put it on there. It lets you set the volume of an alarm. The alarm goes off when the water level gets low or when a fuse blows, but we've never had a fuse blow ever in the field. So the alarm board option makes an electrical contact when the alarm happens. Some thermostats, smart thermostats, will have an alarm input that you can configure. The one we sell, we know how to configure that one so that it will send you a notice. I don't know if it's email or text. It'll send that to you when the alarm goes off.
Is that a low temperature? Is that what that is?
That's low water alarm.
Oh, it's the low water.
Yeah. Yes, a thermostat, a smart thermostat that's internet enabled like that to send you an alarm, they can be configured to send you the low temperature if the house is getting cold. There's a lot of boilers will require, if they're real boilers and not flow controlled, then they require a signal to tell it to turn on. And so we use a rib relay for that. The rib relay takes an input on 2 wires from the relay driver output and the common, and then closes a contact that turns that boiler on. The rib relay looks like that. Rib stands for relay in a box. It's just a relay in a nice little package that can handle a wide range of voltages and control functions. So we just provide it. We hook up these 2 wires, the white, blue, and the white, yellow, and then the yellow and orange go to the input terminal on the boiler. And depending which pins those are is, boiler dependent, but we can help walk you through that if you got questions and your boiler requires it. And then the fill tank. And now it's time to fill the tank. Step 3, we've hooked up the plumbing. You fill the tank with water and or antifreeze. And let's see what the video
Now we're ready to fill the tank. Pour water or water glycol mixture into the tank until it is between the full and low mark. Note, we recommend deionized or distilled water. Pure water is also the cheapest option and has the best heat transferability. However, you will need to note what your uses are. Each 300-foot PEX loop holds about 3 gallons of fluid. The tank holds about 8 gallons in addition to the fluid in the loops. Not all of your fluid will fit in the tank at first. You will be adding more fluid as you purge the loops.
So once you fill those loops, then it's time to fill the boiler loop if you're using a heat exchanger. I'm not going to spend much time on that. You can use one of these pumps to do it. If you're using one of those boilers, you're a professional, you know how to do that part. Some of those will actually have their own water connection and self-purge. Now we're going to power it up and purge the loops. There's a little more detail on that. At the top of every pump module in the control board, there's a module for each pump. There's purge pins. You just take one of the jumpers off like the speed and you bring it up here to the purge and it maxes that pump out. The little light above it goes to yellow, which means it's at max speed. And that's enough to fill the lines, flush the air out of it. And it takes about 3 minutes on average, I think, to fully purge a line. But you just keep doing it until the bubbles stop and topping the water off as you go.
Now we'll purge the air out of the heater and pipes. Place a spare jumper on the purge pins for pump 10. The pump light should become bright yellow. Let the pump run until the gurgling sounds in the water tank cease. Repeat the purging process for each pump that is in use, one at a time. If the tank becomes low during this process, Add more water to the tank as needed. As a note, each 300-foot PEX loop holds about 3 gallons of water. Then, return the spare jumper when complete. And
All right, now the loops are full. You do that also for the boiler, just make sure it's full. And then you can get on to the other system settings and start up. You want to set the boiler temperature 120 or 120 or 120 or 140 is typical, but it'll depend on what type of floor you're feeding. And just keep in mind that the temperature coming out of the boiler isn't directly the temperature going into the floor. If you're adding enough BTUs to overcome the heat losses, things will warm up slowly, or will keep warming up, and then once it gets, and satisfies your thermostats, things will be good. We're going to plug in the thermostat connector and then turn up each thermostat to call for heat. You'll see a blue light come on, and we will.
Step 5.
Do the settings to tell it.
First, power up the heat source and set its temperature. 120 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit is a typical setting. If you have a smart thermostat, plug in that power supply now. Now, plug in the thermostat connector and turn up thermostats to call for heat. Each active thermostat should show a blue zone light at the top of the board, above the thermostat connector. All pumps should be active, each indicated by a green light getting brighter. Now, let's assign the thermostat zones for each pump by moving the jumper to the correct zone. Each pump has its own section of the control board, labeled 1 through 10. Pump 10 is always to the heat source. The other pumps may be assigned to specific zones by moving the jumper to the pins labeled with that zone number. Now we're going to assign pump speeds. Just below the zone selection is the speed selection for the pump. Assign speeds by moving a jumper to the matching pins. Set pumps as low as possible to keep your house warm. Usually those settings end up as follows. Low. This is adequate for most single loops. Medium. This is for pumps that have splitters with 2 loops. And max. This is for heat sources. Pump 10. Step.
All right. So, assign which thermostat controls it and how fast it goes. I've got a pump guide here, right here. That's the table you were looking for. On low speed, it's 0.9 gallons per minute on a single loop. If you ran double loops, it'd be about 0.81 gallons per minute, which is right in the normal range, especially for a concrete floor. For medium, it's 1.4 gallons a minute. It's a pretty big step up. Generally, we only use medium for splitters or 2-loop pump feeding 2 loops, and then it would be about 1.25 gallons per minute. And the max speed, you see there's almost no difference between high and max, but it takes a lot of extra power. Definitely recommend for floor loops, you keep it low and medium. Max is only for the heat source pump, where you want to get all the flow through it you can. Okay, I don't need to watch this video. Okay, now we turn on and adjust the thermostat. You'll see that, watch the lights come on. Now, zone 4, there's a low priority jumper under it. And when that jumper is in place, if zone 1, 2, or 3 is calling for heat, zone 4 will not turn on. Instead, that light will turn yellow. Basically, you can think of that as a function for a garage, where you want to make sure the house might be zones 1, 2, and 3. You want to make sure the house is fully happy before you put heat in the garage. So that's an option that people would ask for, and we made it happen, and it's optional to use or not.
What's that used for? Because I think that's important for me.
Yeah, so it's if you have a low priority zone that you it's okay if it only gets heat when all the other zones are happy. As long as all the other zones are satisfied, then it can turn on zone 4. Without the low priority jumper in place, zone 4 will turn on whenever the thermostat asks for it. All right, final checks. Now's a good time to put a calendar reminder to check the water level every 6 months. You want to reinstall the latch and complete your checks. Turn on the thermostats, make sure that the correct pumps are turning on. You've got that set right. Check that the heat going to the water going to the boiler, you can feel that temperature in the hose, and you feel the hose coming off the boiler, it should be significantly warmer. And then close it all up.
Step 6. Final checks. Check the water level. Add additional water or glycol mix until you reach the upper mark of the water level indicator. As a note, we recommend adding a calendar reminder to check the water level every 6 months. Reinstall and latch the tank cover. Caution, the water may be hot. And finally, complete a final check with the thermostats calling for heat. Check that the pump indicator lights are green or yellow. Step 6.
All right, so now we are installed. We're going to look at a little bit of troubleshooting and the various lights in there for the last couple minutes. We've got power lights, pump lights, water level light, 6-volt light, we'll cover the temperature settings with the max temperature light. And there's a video that talks about all this. I'm not going to play it all here, but it's on the website. So the power light turns green, obviously, pretty easy to understand. The 6-volt overload light, that is something we've had a little bit of trouble with lately. It was a safety feature that we put in to make just to make things safer, and it turns out it's been a big pain because the components that we used don't have the lifespan we thought they were. So if that light goes off, let us know. We'll make it right for you. Get you out one that does not have that problem. The newer version should not have that problem anymore. The pump lights, it starts out a light green. If the pump is plugged in, there's just a little bit more. As the pump powers up then and draws more and more power, it gets brighter and brighter until max power, it looks yellow. If the fuse blows, it's red. As I mentioned before, we've never had a fuse blow. We've got the low water sensor. When the water level gets low, it'll turn everything off. It'll stop all the pump flow. Got to have enough water to keep it safe to run the water heater. So we turn the water off when it gets low. The max tank temperature is a setting that we haven't talked about yet. We can set with a series of jumpers the maximum tank temperature that's allowed. The low here is about 85, high is about 160. It's not carefully calibrated, so we didn't put the actual specific numbers on there. We recommend somewhere right around the middle to start with, depending on what type of floor you have, just to make sure you're not sending heat to water that's too hot out there. As it approaches that tank temperature, that blue light will turn on, the max temp light, and it's not a problem. It's not an error of any sort. It just says, hey, we're happy with the tank temperature now, and then it starts to slow down the pump that goes to the boiler. It'll slow it down and turn it off, and then that way the boiler is just maintaining the temperature in the tank at that point. The thermostat zone lights, pretty self-explanatory. When a thermostat comes on, its corresponding light turns on. As I mentioned, zone 4 can be low priority, and if it's asking for heat and it's being overridden, it turns yellow. Checking the fuses. They're easy to get. We send a spare one. You pop the green cover off. We've never had one fail in the field. Never blown a fuse because of the smart design of the pumps. Now, to check the power, first thing you do is the green light on. If the green light on the board, the power light isn't on, then you check and make sure that the switch on the power supply to the right is on this switch. If this switch is on and that light's not on, then you got to check and make sure that you've got power on the wall and that the cord is plugged in well on the back of the power supply. It's one of those, like on the back of a computer, the cord plugs into it. So check that out. If this has power and the control board does not have power, then check these wires that go to the power plug here. They might be this might be loose, or it might be on the back of the power supply itself. And so we can, if you need any help with that, give us a call. Of course, our tech support is pretty responsive. So troubleshooting, if the house is cold, check the power. Then check the thermostats. Are the thermostats working? Are the blue lights on? If that's not on, then you got to troubleshoot why. Does that thermostat run on a battery? Is the battery low? Or did a wire get loose or broken? Then you check the pump lights. Are the pumps running? Is the pump to the boiler running? And if the pump to the boiler is running, is warm water coming back to the tank? So you check the flow through the boiler. Is the water coming back warmed? And then if that's not happening, then you check the boiler power and settings, and or maybe turn up the boiler temperature setting. So it's providing more heat into the tank. If it's just like everything's cool as opposed to dead. So that's it in a nutshell. Some people had asked for, hey, I've seen a lot of the electric heater. What does a gas heater look like installed? And so here's the most common ones we sell in 3 different installation setups. Yay, okay, we made it. I'm available for as many questions as you want. And we ran a little bit long because of a lot of good questions along the way. What else can I answer for you?